will be able to help secure the Union. You guys know the most northern state in the Union, right? It's Alaska. The most western state is Alaska. The most eastern state is Alaska. You read your trivia, just like my dad, a school teacher. He used to teach us that trivia all the time. So there are uniquenesses about where I am from and what it is that I believe has been instilled in me, in this recognition and appreciation for what God has created for mankind's use, responsible use. And I'm very proud to get to be on a national stage to talk about the resources that we have there. But just being very close to an independent and pioneering spirit that is Alaska, I believe that that is the optimistic, pioneering spirit of the American frontier that still, it animates our history and it defines the American spirit. It's the spirit of those who crossed oceans and carved that wilderness, seeking a better life. The frontier experience was all about individual liberty and empowerment. I think kind of a modern day illustration of that for me personally was the desire that my parents had to move up to Alaska. It was only a couple of months after the '64 earthquake, and that was at the time the world's largest, or at least second largest earthquake. It lasted 4 minutes, and it registered 9.2 back on the old style Richter scale that they had. And it was a sparsely populated, very remote, very expensive place to live. And they had just had this earthquake, and yet my parents didn't have a fear of what was up there, a fear of the unknown. Instead, a sense of adventure and freedom and opportunity. It surpassed a desire for ease and for comfort that perhaps they could find elsewhere. And I thank my parents for giving me that, and Todd's family too. It's an Alaska Native family, an Eskimo family that has been there for generations and generations, where, believe me, their lifestyles, their traditions show that they had to be survivalists. They had to be so independent and self-reliant and have such strong work ethic that I'm so thankful that I married into this family too, to kind of instill even more of that spirit of work ethic and that appreciation for what it is that we can do as empowered individuals. American pioneers and patriots, their determination represented the entrepreneurial free market ethic that made our country great, and it made it full of optimism. That is our foundation, is that optimism. So realizing what our foundation is, we have to kind of take a step back the last couple of years and say, well, what has happened? We know where it is that we came from. We know what our country is built upon. What has happened? It's so unfortunate today that so many Americans feel, instead of optimism, a sense of disempowerment and disenchantment and dissatisfaction. There was a recent Gallup poll that showed 81% of Americans are dissatisfied with the way that our country is being governed. I'm one of those 81%. I have a feeling most of you are too. 81%, this crosses all political boundaries, and this is what we call really broad-based general dissatisfaction. According to that same poll, the majority of Americans have, quote, little or no confidence in the people who seek or hold public office. They believe the federal government is wasteful and has grown, quote, so large and powerful that it poses an immediate threat to the rights and freedoms of ordinary citizens. These sentiments aren't just about Republicans or Democrats. Shoot, even far left-wing liberal wackos who, in all of their misguided thinking, they think that government should be doing even more and should be growing even more. Even they realize now that the government isn't doing anything very well. People are realizing that today's federal government just isn't inefficient and wasteful, but it is actually, our own government is actually a threat to individual freedom. It's not just in our way, it's actually working against our interests, friends. today, the little guy is being left out in the cold by our permanent political class in Washington, D.C., which represents often both sides of the aisle. These are the same politicians who talk endlessly about cutting the budget, and yet they keep spending more. They talk endlessly about this massive, unsustainable debt, and yet they keep incurring more. They spend and they print and they borrow and they spend more, and then they dare send us and our kids and our grandkids the bill for what they are creating that is getting in our way, in the private sector's way. They send us the bill for what they are doing. They don't feel the same urgency that we do. Why should they? Business is good for them. They have padded themselves from the economic pain that the rest of America feels. And I said recently at a Tea Party event in Iowa, I said, ever notice how many of them, they get to Washington, D.C. of very modest means, and yet miraculously, throughout the years, they become very, very wealthy individuals. It's because they derive their power and their wealth from access to your money, to the taxpayer's dollar. What do they do with your money? They use it to bail out their Wall Street friends and their corporate cronies, and to reward campaign contributors, and to buy votes with their earmarks. And there is a name for this, and it's called crony capitalism. And this is what we must defend our republic against. See, this is the root that grows our economic problems. Our unsustainable $14 or $15 trillion debt, our outrageously high unemployment numbers, and the housing market that is in the tank, and a stagnant economy. These are all symptoms. And if you notice, the politicians are focused on the symptoms while the disease continues to go untreated. We will not solve our economic problems in this country until we confront the crony capitalism of our permanent political class. This is not the capitalism of free men and free markets. It's not capitalism based on innovation and hard work and ethics, and sacrifice and risk. No, this is the capitalism of connections and government bailouts and handouts, waste, influence peddling, corporate welfare. This is the crony capitalism that destroyed Europe's economies. It's the collusion of big government, big business, big finance, and big labor bosses. And that collusion is to the detriment of the rest of us. The little guys, Reagan had said, you can't be for big government, big taxes, and big bureaucracy and still be for the little guy. So when I talk about the little guy, I say that with all due respect too, okay? It is a slap in the face of our small business owners, the true entrepreneurs, the true job creators in this country. You who own small businesses, you account for 70% of America's businesses, all of the jobs created through you, small business owners, 70% of our jobs. It's you who own these businesses, and you're the economic engine, but you don't grease the wheels of government power. This collusion, it's counter to everything that our republic was founded on. But it's at the heart of President Obama's economic vision for America. This is his fundamental transformation of America that he warned us about. Remember, he told us just days before the vote was taken that his goal was to fundamentally transform America. We tried to warn you. We didn't do a good enough job of, and the press was absolutely absent in terms of vetting and asking what did he mean by fundamentally transforming America into something that we do not even recognize? Well, now we're seeing what he meant. In practice, this is socialism for the very rich and for the very poor. But it's a brutal form of capitalism for for the rest of us. It is socialism for the very poor who can't find jobs in this economy. And therefore, they're reduced to a degrading dependence on a near bankrupt, centralized government to provide for them. This robs them of the life-affirming and pride that comes with self-determination and self-initiative, aka a job. It keeps them forever under the thumb of government, where they are shackled. Government's doing nothing to let them bust out and bust free of those shackles because government is in the way of the job creators. And Obama's vision is socialism for the very rich, for the crony capitalism, those who participate in this corrupt and compromised system that has resulted in so many of the economic woes that we see today. Now, the very rich who get the bailouts and the stimulus funds and the special favors that allow them to waive or even help write the regulations that the rest of us have to follow, those burdensome regulations that really act as a boot on the neck of the small business owners, those of us who don't have friends in these high places. We don't pay for the lobbyists who will write the rules that apply to us but don't apply to them. The White House today, if you notice, they pay a lot of lip service to the interests of the working men and women, the middle class. But at the end of the day, they're all too happy to burden us in the middle class, our families and our kids and our grandkids, with the bill to bail out their Wall Street friends. And Obama now, he calls them the fat cats, right? And he publicly disparages their practices there on Wall Street. But then he shows up, hat in hand, at their fundraisers, and I think, calling these guys the fat cats, I think his catnip is promises of more stimulus, more debt, and all of this in the name of his re-election bid. We should not forget that for all of his lofty rhetoric, our president is a Chicago politician. He's a Chicago politician where graft and cronyism and quid pro quo are the methods of that infamous Chicago political machine from which Barack Obama emerged. This corruption isn't just the result of a few bad apples. No, it's a skewed system that's typical of one not allowing a level playing field. It's government picking winners and losers, politicians deciding who will be too big to fail and who deserves the bailout and who deserves the grants and non-competitive processes, who's going to get your money. Folks, if one desires opportunity for all and to save America, then the only solution is sudden and relentless reform. And I know of what I speak because I, too, served in public office in a state that had a corruption problem. The difference, though, is that I fought that corrupt system, that political machine, and Barack Obama used that machine in his state to advance.